Welcome to Business Legal Lifecycle TV, the live TV show all about the legal aspects of your business. We've designed this TV show to educate you in simple to understand plain English ways for complex legal terms, to help you understand why you undertake certain legal aspects of your business, and to help you develop a plan for the future success of your business. Did you know that any business owner is on average 7 months away from losing everything? And that is the average time that it takes for a successful business to fold when an aspect of their business is not set up correctly. Have you ever wanted to get legal advice but didn't understand what was going on? And do you feel like there's a divide between lawyers and their clients? If that's so, then this TV show is for you. We've designed the show to empower you and your business with the knowledge and tools to help ensure that those problems that so many businesses encounter don't happen to you. Business Legal Lifecycle TV delivers a twice-weekly show focusing on the legal aspects of your business. At lunchtime on Mondays, we present Fast Fix Monday, a quick 5 to 10 minute show to give you some actionable steps to consider for this week in your business. And at lunchtime on Wednesdays, we present our in-depth show. It's generally between 30 minutes to an hour to go through the complicated legal aspects of your business in a simple to understand and plain English way. That can be through educational pieces or interviews with experts in the fields. We welcome you to Business Legal Lifecycle TV, and here's our show.
Afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Business Legal Lifecycle TV. I'm Craig Mason, and I have with me the other founder of the Business Legal Lifecycle, Jeremy.
Jeremy Stratton. How is everyone today?
And this month we're talking about within the Business Legal Lifecycle, it's phase 1, which is the conception. So on your screen at the moment, you should be able to see the Business Legal Lifecycle and follow the arrow down to conception, which is obviously the first part of any business and their legal life cycle. So I'm going to continue talking about conception. And today we're talking about, the title of the episode is What Are You Doing? So you're thinking about starting a business, and then you need to think about exactly how that business is going to be structured, and the different ways that you can go about that. So, Jeremy, if you want to flick over to the next slide.
Yeah, so we'll start off here. So today's topic is what are you doing? So what we're talking about here is what are you doing in your business, and why that's important, especially in phase 1 of the business legal life cycle, is if you don't know where you're going, you have no idea how you're going to get there. So today we're going to talk about the concept of starting up with an end in mind. We're also going to talk about the differences between the key concepts of a business versus an entity, and how that then applies to the different ways that you might start up a business. So you might start up a business as a business purchase. You might look at doing a share purchase into an existing company. You might look at doing a share subscription, or you might look at going into a new business. So today we're going to go through this as a topic. And the different concepts behind each of those. So there might be a little bit of technical stuff in here. We're hopeful that we can explain this to you in a simple to understand manner. As always, please feel free to ask questions. If you ask questions in the comments, then I have my iPad here. I can double check that as we're going. And if you want to leave questions to the end, then by all means leave that to the end, and we're happy to answer them. So, Craig, anything else to add in before I kick off?
No, I think let's do it.
All right. So the first slide, start up with an end in mind. So if you were watching Monday's show, Fast Fix Monday, we were talking about setting goals. And here is something and starting up with an end in mind is something that I have developed over the last few years around, well, what are you actually doing in your business? Now, anyone who's read Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People will know that the second habit is to start up with the end in mind. So, and the reason behind that is to know where you're going. So start up and have a plan for the future. What I've found in business and in advising businesses is the fact that no one really starts up their business with the end in mind. And a lot of people are scared by the prospect of having to think about what actually is the end that they're going to achieve in their business. Because they don't know. They have no idea. It's funny, I went to my 20-year school reunion, which makes me feel nice and old, a couple of months ago. And out of the 50 or 60 odd people that were there, none of the people there were doing what they were thinking they're doing. If you had asked me 20 years ago whether I thought I'd be hosting a Facebook Live TV show, well, I would have probably first of all asked, what the hell's Facebook? But you know what I mean? I had no idea where I'm going. So this concept of starting up with an end in mind is all about, well, having some sort of goal. So having some idea about where you're going will help you get there. Now, you will change it. We've changed it. We started out Stratton Mason lawyers and then developed the business legal life cycle. That's very normal in business. You know, we've got other people that we do business with that we're hopeful to get on as guests who have started businesses and then developed into other businesses as they go. So I think the main reason that I raise this now is that starting up with an end in mind gives you an idea about what you should be doing in your business and where you should be going. And it gives you an idea that you don't necessarily need to know exactly where you're going in the future, just to know that you're going to go somewhere and get somewhere. So as I said before, today we're going to talk about the different ways of starting up a business. And so to start off with that, Craig's going to talk about a key concept, and that's the difference between the business and an entity. So Craig, if you want to have a chat around that.
Yeah, absolutely. So as Jeremy said, one of the key concepts here that you need to understand is the difference between a business or a business name and the actual entity that's behind that. And if you're embarking in the business world and going to buy an existing business, then you need to understand these sorts of concepts. So a business name is simply that it's owned by something else. So if we flick on to the next slide, this is an example. So ABC Pty Ltd is a company, obviously, and they have within their structure, they've got 4 businesses. So it's ABC Constructions, which is a business, ABC Developments, which is a business, ABC Equipment, business, ABC Designs, a business. So you're not buying, if you were coming into that, then you're talking about ABC Pty Ltd. You're not talking about those individual business names. So that's a concept that you need to understand. And then the next example on the next slide, Jeremy, is where you've got, they're all interrelated companies, but they all own and run businesses as separate entities. And so that's the difference between, when we talk about this part, it's business versus entity, is exactly that. So your business is ABC Constructions, but your actual entity is ABC Constructions Pty Ltd. And it's a concept that will become more obvious in the next few slides as to why it becomes important, because you need to know what you're dealing with when you're entering into these sorts of transactions. So key concept to today, and as I said, it will become obvious, but if you've got some more questions around that, then something that definitely here to answer, because it is something that we see a lot of people get tripped up on, and it can become an issue and down the track or during negotiations and those sorts of things about how the whole thing's going to take place. So key concept, happy to answer questions, but then moving on, Jeremy, to the next slide, which is business purchase.
Yeah, so the first concept of the actual sale of the business is a business purchase. So just to go back to what Craig was talking about before, and this concept of a business. So each of ABC Constructions, in this example, ABC Developments and ABC Equipment, ABC Designs, for anyone who can't see the slides, they're a separate business. So when you do a business purchase, you're actually buying that business separately. So what the business purchase concept lets us do is to sell off each of those businesses separately. So the law recognises that each business is a separate entity that can be sold, but it's operated by the company behind that business. So just going back to the business purchase slide. So basically what this lets us do is, from a legal point of view, it lets us take a separate business entity and sell that to another person. So the classic example that we do a lot of work in this space is a rent roll. Versus a real estate agency that's a sales business. So, if you've ever bought and sold property, you've dealt with a real estate agent. You've probably seen Ray White and all those at Remax and LJ Hooker and Harcourts and all those different businesses, Richardson and Wrench. There's many of them out there. They will generally have 2 components to their business. They'll have a rent roll, which is all the rental properties that they manage, and that's a really valuable asset. And then they'll have a sales side of the business. What a lot of people don't realize is the fact that the rent roll can be sold as a separate business, and it's actually quite a lucrative business. As I say, we do a lot of work in this space, and people buy the rent rolls as a separate business entity. So that can include phone numbers. It includes business names, as Craig said before. It includes the actual business that is the rent roll and what's behind it. It can include the software that runs the business. It can include many different aspects of the actual business, and they can be sold as a separate entity. And that's important because when you sell an entity in Australia, as anyone who's in business would understand, we have this great tax called the Goods and Services Tax, the GST. Maybe not a great tax, but it's a tax nonetheless. And when you buy and sell assets, you've got to pay GST on those. And so a business can be sold as what we call a going concern, and GST isn't payable. So as a concept, a business purchase is the actual sale of the business behind the company that actually operates it. So going back to the real estate example, the sales side of the business is also another asset that can be sold. So you can sell the sales asset or the rent roll asset as a separate business. And the same can be true in the example that we showed before with the construction company. In that one, if the developer wanted to sell off his development arm, he could sell off just his ABC developments and keep the other businesses. In that we also had ABC Designs, and he could sell the design aspect of his business. But there are limitations to that. You can't bring in investors into one particular business, and we'll talk about that in a minute in share purchases, but there are limitations. So with all this stuff, there's advantages and disadvantages. The great thing about having a business as a separate entity is the fact that you can slice it off and sell it off. And you would have seen a lot of businesses do that over the years. So that's a business purchase. There are a lot of moving parts to a business purchase. There's a lot of things that you need to get right with them. But you need to know, as a basic concept, what a business purchase is, so that if you are looking at starting up a business that way, that you can understand what you're doing and what you're actually buying. Craig, anything you wanted to add on to business purchases?
No, I don't think so. I think it flows into the next one. So
yep. We'll hand over to you for the next one.
So this is share purchase. So talking about Jeremy's example with the real estate agent or the ABC Constructions example, is that say the real estate agent was operating under a company, real estate Pty Ltd, and they were operating two businesses within that, which is the rent roll and the sales arm. You might be buying the company, as in the shares in the company of the actual real estate Pty Ltd in this example. So you're taking on all of that. And so instead of just buying the separate business, you're buying the shares in the company. The disadvantages or potential issue with that is, of course, that you're taking on all the liability, obviously, of the company once you come in to the company. Whereas before, the company stays with the seller, and they can do whatever they want with the company, and you're just buying the actual ABC Constructions part of it, or the ABC Developments, or the rent roll, or whatever it might be. So, as Jeremy said, there's advantages and disadvantages of all these sorts of things, but share purchase is where you're buying the shares in the company, i.e. ABC Constructions Pty Ltd. So, that's the distinction there. Next one.
Yep. All right. And so the next one is share subscription. So this is slightly different to a share purchase. So this is where you might be looking at bringing an investor in, or buying or investing in a company. Now, there are different tax advantages to doing different things in company structures. And so one way that you can do it is through a share subscription. So this is where essentially you might have 100 shares in a company. And rather than the founders selling those shares, they might issue more shares to a person coming into the company. Now, why might you do that? There might be tax reasons that you might want to do that. There might be capital gains tax reasons. There might be transfer duty reasons that you might want to do that, because you're not actually transferring an asset. Now, there are lots of complicated rules on this, and in a future show we'll get an accountant in to come in and explain some of the concepts, because they're well beyond Craig and I. But a share subscription is a great way that you can use for a business to actually bring someone in and not lose your shares in the company. You might lose your interest in the company. You might use a percentage of your interest in the company, but this can be a great way of avoiding tax and those kind of things. The other thing I'd like to add in at this point is between share purchases and share subscriptions. When you are investing in a company, you're taking on the risk and all the liabilities of the company. So this applies for both. as Craig said before, there are lots of risks that go into it. So if you're going to invest in a company or take shares or do a share subscription, you really need to engage the services of a really good accountant or lawyer, and probably a business coach or a mentor to actually look into the company, what's behind the company, what's actually happened in the company's assets over a period of time. Because when you take on the company, you do take on the risk of what's in the company. So that can be alleviated by doing some really good due diligence, kind of, Craig, on a business.
Absolutely, it's a must. If you're going to do any of these sorts of things, as Jeremy said, you need to get some advice. But say you do embark on it by yourself, if you can just take one piece of advice, it is to make sure that you have a due diligence clause in there that allows you to look into it and terminate the contract that if you're not happy with the due diligence. So
and remember also that you might engage a lawyer or an accountant to do their due diligence, but at the end of the day, the buck stops with you. When you do your research into it, you've got to make sure that you're happy with what you're buying into and that you've asked all the questions. There are no stupid questions, as they say, so make sure that you ask them and get the information. So that's buying a business. So that's obviously one option that you can do when you're in the conception phase. So you might choose to buy that business, buy into that business. The other option is a new business. So Craig, do you want to go through what that involves, and then we might go through some entities that you can start businesses in, and just explain that for people who don't understand those concepts.
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously the title speaks for itself, new business. So you've got an idea for a business and there's nothing that you can want to buy or available to you, and you're starting basically a whole new fresh business, which would be a pretty exciting time. So this is where, and I know we talk about it a lot, is you need your team, your initial team, to go through these sorts of things. Because going back again, starting with an end in mind, this is where you're working out how you're going to set up the new business that you want to do. So setting it up now, thinking about something in the future, will mean that hopefully you've set it up at the beginning, which allows you to do certain things that incorporates what one of your ends might be. So important to think about, spend some time doing it. Now's not the time. I know it's exciting, you want to set up your business, you want to get out there, but it's the time you spend talking and engaging with the experts at this stage will put you in the best possible spot going forward. So everyone wants to put their shingle out there and start selling their whatever, but talk to your team. So assemble that team, and hopefully you've done that already, and then you're talking about the new business. So in terms of, we'll go through the sort of different structures, but I think all I wanted to say about this slide is really the engaging the initial team, particularly the accountant, the lawyer, your financial planner, those sort of people that are going to be giving you financial advice about the best way to structure it. So new business.
Yeah.
Next one, Jeremy.
Yeah. So I'll kick off this one if you like. We'll take them in turns. So a company. So we have gone through this before, but if you're new to the Business Legal Lifecycle TV, I thought I'd go through this. So a company is a separate legal entity from the people behind the company. Now, companies were brought in back in the late 1800s. They're a widely accepted structure. A lot of people do have a bit of apprehension about using them. People do see them as complicated. I was just meeting with a client who's operated a business for 20 years who hasn't set up a company. But what he didn't appreciate, and what a lot of people don't appreciate, is the risk of not having your business in a separate entity. So there's no slide for a sole trader today, and anyone who's listening to this on the podcast won't be able to see it anyway unless they come back and watch the TV, but or the Facebook Live TV. But a sole trader is basically the person behind the company. So in this case, you'll see, and let me describe it for the people who are listening. You've got a company, and it's got basically two roles in the company. It's got a director and shareholders. So a sole trader would just essentially be the shareholders and directors by themselves. Now, the risk in operating any business like that, especially a news business, is that the buck stops with you. All the liability rests with you. Now, I don't think that's a good way to start a business. I don't think, yes, it's cheaper. Yes, there's less compliance costs, but it's a massive risk, because if something goes wrong with that business and it incurs a debt that it can't pay, you have to pay that debt. It comes out of your own assets. So a company is a separate legal entity. So the director has the day-to-day management of the company. So they're the ones who basically make the decisions in relation to the company. And the only way they can be liable is if, one, they sign a personal guarantee for the debts of the company, or two, they're what we call insolvent trading. And insolvent trading means that you know that your company can't meet the debts that it's incurring, and you go out there and actually keep on incurring debts, sign leases, sign up new agreements with the full knowledge that you're not actually going to be able to pay back the debts. Then the law says, well, you know what, you can't just go ahead and do that. You have to pay that debt, and we're going to come after you for that debt. So a director has the day-to-day management, and is, in most cases, so long as you're doing everything properly and you're not trying to basically, for want of a better term, screw over the people that you're dealing with, which I hope no one watching this show or listening to the podcast would do, the director is not going to be liable for those debts. The shareholders basically serve two functions. First of all, they own the company. They own the share capital in the company. So in the company, the share capital is, and there can be many different ways of doing it, and many ways to be right with the share company, but they own the shares in the company. So the shareholders have the right, by the fact that they own it, to the dividends of the company. So when the company makes money, it can pay fees to a director, it can pay income to its employees, and then it can pay dividends to its shareholders. So the shareholders basically that's their primary function. Their secondary function is, as the owners of the company, they get to decide who can and can't be the directors of the company. So normally a company will have its rules, which is company constitution, which will say that 50% of the shareholders plus one can decide who are the directors of the company. So to give you an example, if I have a company and Craig and I have a company, and Craig owns 51% of the shares and I own 49%, Craig can normally decide who the directors can be of the company. You don't do that normally when you're in partnership, and we certainly didn't do that, did we, Craig, where the shareholders are 50-50. So if we want to change the shareholder, we have to make a decision between the two of us. So that's the concept of a company. It's a widely used entity and something that you should really know about. If you want to know more about it, we've done other shows on going a deeper dive into companies and these structures, so you can do that. So that's companies, and I'll hand over to Craig to do discretionary and family trusts.
Yeah. So up on the screen, and for those people in the podcast, obviously you can't see that. There's a trustee, and then they're the trustee of the trust, and then there's beneficiaries of the trust. There's also an appointor of the trustee, or the trust, sorry. And the way that works is the appointor is the person that has the power to appoint a new trustee. So normally it would be the trustee would be a company, and then they would be the trustee of a trust. The trust would own, say, the business in this example. The beneficiaries would be, family members or whoever else it might be. And so that would be how that would work. You could also have an example where the shareholders of the company could also be a trust as well, which is something that obviously you speak to your accountant and your lawyer about it before you go embark on those sorts of things, but that's another sort of structure within that as well. So the way it would work is that the trustee obviously can be changed, but they own the business, or they acquire legal ownership of the business, and the trust actually runs it. And there'll be benefits from a tax point of view and those sorts of things for distributing income and dividends through the company. So that'll be the reason to set that up. There's obviously asset protection elements to all this as well, which is one of the important distinctions. We're not going to go through all that today, obviously, but this is more a overview so you understand these sort of concepts when you're talking to your initial team about it. So I guess the company with the trustee structure, Jeremy, would probably be the more popular strategy at the moment, I would say.
Oh, I think it definitely is. I mean, it provides great tax benefits from the capital gains tax discount you get, as long as you do it right. And again, as Craig says, get advice. Don't just rely on what we're telling you today. But it's a very popular structure to use in business at the moment. Do you want to just quickly address, though, I think it's a question that I get quite often, and it's something that I'm always surprised that a lot of consultants don't realise, that the trustee's liability. Do you want to just quickly just address that?
Yeah, so the trustee is still liable. They just get to indemnify themselves out of the trust assets. So if there isn't any trust assets, then there's obviously an issue. And the same with what Jeremy said with the company and directors being responsible. There's still going to be personal guarantees and insolvent trading issues if you've got a trustee that's a company. So it's not just go about and do whatever you want. There's still hard implications. So yeah, unfortunately, there's not a do what you want structure. Yeah.
Probably fortunately if you're the ones incurring the debts.
Yeah.
Yeah, all right, cool.
So unit trust?
Yeah, so the next one, as Craig says, is unit trust. So you'll notice for anyone watching the TV show and to describe to the people listening on the podcast, the unit trust is set up very similar to a discretionary trust. You have a trustee who acquires the legal ownership of the business, and then you have the trust, and it has unit holders. So a unit trust, is kind of a merger between a company and a discretionary trust, because like a company, its unit holders are like the shareholders in the company. So they generally would hold the units on a percentage basis, and that would entitle them to a percentage of the income. So, if Craig and I were in a unit trust and we were 50-50 unit holders and there was income, Craig would get 50%, I would get 50%. But it's still in a trust structure, so then if you sell the asset, then you get the capital gains tax benefits in the future. As Craig said before, the trustee, though, is primarily liable for the debts of the trust. Now, this is even more important with a unit trust, because you usually wouldn't have a unit trust that wasn't a trading trust of some sort. So it would be incurring some sort of liability in its business somehow. So in a unit trust, it should never have an individual behind it as the trustee. It should always have a separate company. Yes, it's an additional cost to set up. Yes, it's an additional cost to maintain, but the benefits go well beyond that. So make sure that you have a unit trust. If you do have a unit trust, that you have the unit holders are your individuals, and they're protected through having a trustee. Another point too is that, as I said before, unit trusts aren't as popular as they used to be. So they used to be a very, very common structure that we used to set up lots of businesses and lots of property developments in. There was a case back in, I think it was about 2005, 2004. I'm not going to bore you with the details, but essentially there was a business that was run through a unit trust, and that business got sued. Now, the court found that the unit holders were liable under the unit trust because there was not a simple clause in the trust deed that excluded that liability. Now, it's very easy to miss that. And so what we often say to our partners that we do work with and through our accountants and even our clients is it's worthwhile having a review of your unit trust, especially if you've got one that's 15 to 20 years old that you're still using, to make sure that liability is excluded. It's a pretty simple change now to do an amendment of the trust to exclude that liability. But if you don't, and it gets sued, then the unit holders can actually be held liable. So if you are using a unit trust or you've had a unit trust in the past, you might want to double check that. So Craig, anything on unit trusts?
No, I don't think so.
No? Well, let's click off to the last one, which is partnerships.
Yeah, so obviously in that regard, we're talking about you're going into a new business and you're going in with someone else, obviously, hence partnership. It's probably an older sort of thing that was around. Most professional services firms, lawyers, accountants set up as partnerships because they were actually restricted and that's all they could do once in a while. And so everyone was a partner. Now there's incorporated legal practices and various other entities that can be law firms run under, which means the directors rather than partners. So as the example is, we've got two entities. They could be individuals forming a partnership. We'd suggest that obviously if you're going to do that, you're dealing with someone else, you want to get an agreement in place to govern all these sorts of things. If you don't have a partnership agreement, then you're left with the Partnership Act, which again is quite an old act and probably doesn't necessarily keep up to date with exactly these sorts of things. So don't just rely on that, have a partnership agreement. The same goes with the company as well. If you've got a shareholders agreement, those sorts of things. But again, we're not going to go through all that today. But so you've got two entities, but you could have two companies, I guess, as a partnership as well. And you might see that more in the property development type area, like a joint venture almost, where you've got two entities forming a partnership. And there's liability issues with partnerships as well. As I said, it's not something you see as much as you used to, but there are going to be certain industries where it could be quite a good structure to put in place. So again, I know I've harped on about it, but talking to your initial team about this sort of structure is a must. So that's partnership.
Yeah, and just with partnerships, just remember too that each of the partners is primarily liable for the debts. So if you are an individual as trustee for a trust going into a partnership with someone else as an individual as trustee for a trust, you're both liable for the whole debt and all the debts. It's not asset protection. You're liable. You just got the right to be indemnified out of the trust assets. So yeah, as Craig said, get advice. And I'll just flick off that slide. And just on that point, I think one of the things that we're very big on here at the Business Legal Lifecycle is getting advice from your consultants, but also having your team of consultants work together, aren't we, Craig? Because we know the legal side of things. We know accountants know the tax side of things. We know that your financial planners will know your financial position. And not getting advice from your whole team is really to your detriment. And there's a lot of consultants out there who don't want to get advice from other people, or they don't think it's necessary. It's amazing how often we see that fall out and become a problem for a client who we might understand something about their legal aspects and that their accountant might not understand from the accounting side. So yeah, I think that's a big problem, don't you think, right?
Yeah, absolutely. There's obviously no I in team. When you're putting together a team, you want everyone to work together. If you isolate each person's advice into one bucket each, and they're not talking, then they could be saying one thing which is right, but the other advice about something else that they may not know about is going to mean that advice becomes quite an issue. So you want to be talking and discussing all these sorts of things. And if your team members aren't comfortable with that, then have a chat to them. And if they're still not comfortable with it, then maybe it's time to find a new team member.
and just on that, I often say you don't know what you don't know, but I was actually looking on Twitter this morning and I noticed a quote from Stephen Hawking. I'd just like to read out: "The greatest enemy of knowledge is not ignorance; it is the illusion of knowledge." And I think that's really true of where consultants think that they know something. I know lawyers who give tax advice. I know accountants who give legal advice. And really that ignorance, that illusion of knowledge where they might not understand the nuances of the law really is dangerous to people. So get advice, make sure you talk to your whole team, make sure that you follow what they're saying and trust what they're saying, because you'll find that you're set up much better and that you'll know what you're doing much better than other people in their business. So I think that's it from us today. Thank you very much for watching. We'll be back on Monday with Fast Fix Monday. Craig, anything else?
No, I don't think so. Hopefully you've got some value out of that. As Jeremy said at the beginning, any questions we can answer along the way, but we'll see you or talk to you on Monday.
And if you listen to this on the podcast, thanks very much. We appreciate your feedback. We are doing our best to make sure that we talk through any visuals that we have on the slides. So if you are listening to the audio version of this, then we'd love your feedback back at lifecycle@jeremystretton.com, and we could make sure that we're getting the right experience for you, because we know that user experience is everything. So thanks everyone. See you on Monday.
Bye.